Welcome back to the Last Mile Radio with Ryan Leaf. Today we are coming to you from one of the Last Miles facilities in Putnamville, Indiana, for a set of really special conversations with students and program leaders. First up, I give an address to the students here in Putnamville around my own journey, the importance of maintaining hope, and what it means to take true accountability, and more. What's up, fellas? Hey. Just break the ice right away. I was exactly where you guys were 10 years ago. 10 years ago today, I was in a prison cell. So, and it wasn't, and probably the other thing you want to know is it probably was easier for me when I got out, you would assume, right? Famous football player, former millionaire, right? No. I walked out of prison December 3rd, 2014. I didn't have a dime to my name. The one thing I did have, and probably that some may not, is I had a place to lay my head. Okay, mom and dad, for whatever reason, have unconditionally loved me, regardless of all my poor actions and behaviors and decisions. And they were there outside that door when I was released to pick me up, and I had a place to lay my head. A lot of guys don't. They don't have a place to go. So I suppose I did have that there, but that was it. There's no work. Everybody in the world knew about it. I'm not a local fuck up. When I fuck up, it's ESPN, CNN, everywhere. Everybody knows about it. So, I couldn't roll in, and not check the felon box on my resume. They already know it. They already probably have it filled out for me before I come in there. And no one wanted to be around me. No one. My hometown newspaper, where I'm supposed to be kind of a hero, I'm the only Montanan who's ever been drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. There's only one of me. There's more first-round draft picks in the Manning family than the whole state of Montana ever. Okay, so I wake up the next morning after a real grateful night of sleeping in a real bed. I slept on pretty much a concrete slab with a pad like this big, that it deflated because I was 300 pounds at the time. And so there was a lot of gratitude that morning. I wake up, now the ego is still, right? I used to be a millionaire at 21, and now I'm living in mom and dad's house after spending 3 years in prison. They're making me breakfast. It doesn't do a lot for your ego, but I was just kind of living in gratitude at the moment. Nice bed. Slept in a bed all night. And then I wake up, and in the newspaper, my hometown newspaper, there's a cartoon. And it said, a little goofy looking bucktooth picture of me with a little quote, says, "Lock up your medicine cabinets, Ryan Leaf's out." And so whatever little bit of semblance of hope I had in that moment, it was dashed like that. And so my muscle memory was immediate. I don't want to feel this way. And then I thought, oh yeah, I forgot for a minute. These people just think I'm a piece of shit. This is how it's going to be. So how am I supposed to do anything of worth again? You wear this anchor of this, that, and the other, or these identifiers, what somebody else has for you, and you believe it because you've been told it so much. I'm more used to hearing somebody say, "Ryan Leaf, that bust, that piece of shit," and I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. And then I go speak at an event and somebody stands up and gives me and my eyes directly go to my feet because I'm not used to that. Because you get beat over the head with it so much. And what you come to understand and maybe accept at some point when you surrender to all that is that it doesn't matter what anybody else says. It says, you can have the life of your dreams starting the moment you walk out of here, and better than that, starting when you do something like this. This is a conscious choice. I've been in prison. I know that unless you make a conscious choice to do something rehabilitative, it's not going to just be offered to you. You're just not going to be rehabilitated when you get out unless you actually do something. There was no anything rehabilitative from it. All the counselors, the turnover was so quick. I'd be with a counselor for a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden they're off to another job, or they couldn't stand being in there. You don't have any consistency to have any sort of trust with anybody. Ever. And I spent most of my days laying on my bed, watching my little 13-inch flat screen TV and fucking with the guards. That was my life. I thought I was smarter than everybody else, made them go get my mail, whatever. I had to figure out a way to control whatever situation I was in. So, I'm not the epitome of what an inmate that does it right does. I wish I was. I wish this program existed when I was in. I had to figure this all out kind of the hard way. And so the hard way came in the form of my roommate. My roommate was a Afghan-Iraqi war veteran. And he had done something that I think most people have probably done once in their life, and he drove drunk one night, and he killed somebody. He was 23, he was home on leave from Afghanistan, and he'd spent the last 8 years in there. And he was not resolute with being that dude, right? He had made amends for what he did, and he tried to better himself. He had his GI Bill available to him for when he got out. He didn't know if he was ever going to get out, but he was studying to take his ACT, and he wanted to get into college and become like a helicopter pilot. I'm sitting there, and I'm 26 months into this 32-month sentence, and I'm just sitting there watching him and thinking, what an idiot. What is he doing? Look at us. We are warehoused. We're a number. We're a number. And we're losers. No one cares what we're doing or what are you doing. It's a waste of your time, man. I was so defeatist, and I was so angry, and I was so all of it. And luckily he didn't listen to me. He kept upon his business. And then one day he felt comfortable enough to confront me. And he just said, Ryan, you don't understand the value that you have, not only from the men in here, but for when you get out, because you're going to get out. And I've had so many of those come to Jesus moments, from coaches, from mentors, from family, from people that, cared about me. And I just told them, I got this, big, strong football player. I don't need your help. So I can't tell you exactly why, when he suggested that we go down to the prison library and help prisoners who didn't know how to read, learn how to read, why I went. I still can't tell you why I did. I would argue to say that it was because the substance I had been taking leading up to my incarceration had been out of my system for those 26 months. So maybe I just had a little more of a perspective or an open-mindedness to something new. I still think that's a bunch of shit, because I don't know why I did it, but I went. I still went begrudgingly. I remember walking down the hallway, right? I'm in a red jumpsuit. You got the line against the wall there. You just walk in. I remember this metaphorically kicking my shoes like a little child, thinking this is stupid. This isn't going to help me. Doesn't he know how important I am? And the irony of the guy who's in a red jumpsuit walking down a prison hallway still thinks he's important is exactly the problem, okay? And so I walk into this room, and I walk into a place where, as you guys know, when you show any sort of vulnerability or transparency in a place like these, that doesn't happen. You can get yourself hurt, taken advantage of. It's not something we do. It usually limits us then from getting the recovery we need or the rehabilitation, because we're not able to open up and be honest with one another because of those things, whatever affiliations or anything that resembles that at all. But all of a sudden, this man, probably in his early 60s, walks up to me, and he says something that I'd never heard before from another man, was, "Hey, Ryan, I never learned how to read. I've been faking it forever. Can you help me?" So growing up in Montana, which is a very cowboy culture, and then in locker rooms in college and the NFL, I had never seen another man actually step in front of me and go, "Hey, I'm really fucking hurting here. Can you help me?" And if you haven't seen it or heard it, it's not in movies, it's not in books. that's not what masculinity is, right? It's big, strong. I don't need that. I got this. Rub some dirt on it. Whatever the hell you want to talk about. So when you haven't seen it or heard it, how are you supposed to do it? And it affected me so much, especially during my playing career, at the end of my playing career, when I started developing these mental health issues, and instead of going in and talking to my head coach about those things in my last stop in Seattle and saying, hey, I'm depressed, man. I cannot get out of bed. I feel lazy. And him hopefully responding in kind like, let's go figure it out, Ryan. Let's figure out what's going on and get you right. Maybe I'm the starting quarterback in Super Bowl 40 for the Seattle Seahawks. But instead, I don't do any of that. I just do what I always tended to do, and that's just flight, right? I'm either going to fight my ass off or I'm going to get the hell out of there. That's just exactly what it was, and I'm getting out of here. I don't have to, worry about this anymore. I'm still rich. That's all that matters. I'm rich and I'm famous. And so when I walked into that room and he actually said that to me, my first reaction was like, what's wrong with this dude? But we went to work. And I'm going to tell you this, I would have loved for anybody to believe that when I walked back to my cell, that I thought to myself, I got it figured out. It's going to be gravy for me the rest of the time. It doesn't happen like that, ever. Most times we don't know when it's happening. We just are kind of led in this direction. And maybe when you first applied for the last mile, you didn't know what it was going to mean or how incredibly fruitful it would be to your self-esteem, your innovation, your creative side, the hope part of all of it, okay? And I do think that's what the last mile gives. I think it gives hope that there's something bigger out there for you that can't be defined. And so it didn't happen in that moment. I went back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. And I'm going to tell you, I think anytime you have any sort of success, 90% of it is showing up. Now, the last 10% is hard. It is. It's incredibly hard. But 90% of it is just simply being where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, when you don't want to be there. I don't know how many mornings that I didn't want to go into the gym and make a certain number of free throws and three-pointers that my dad took me to every morning before homeroom. I like my warm bed, especially when it was snowing out in the morning, right? But I did it, and no one ever sees that stuff. They just assume you were super talented. Of course you made it to the NFL. No. I mean, the work is huge, and 90% of it is just showing up when you're supposed to. So I did that, okay? And then I did the work with a guy. So here we are, two individuals in the most, I would argue, probably adverse place you could be. We all know that prison is not a deterrent. It's another society for us. That was something I didn't know. I was so fearful of justice, corrections, prisons. But you find out pretty quick, 3 hots, bed, no responsibility. Realistically, if you don't want to do a damn thing, which is what I did for 26 months of that stay, and just sit on your ass and get fat, you can. There's a reason why we're the most heavily populated prison population in the world, right? People sometimes feel comfortable there when they can't make it in the fashion that they want to or feel like they need to on the outside. It's easier to maybe come back and do this. And then we won't dive into the recidivism part of all of this and the big business of for-profit prisons. But I kept coming back. And we were there and no one was watching. A couple guys that were having a hard time helping each other out. And so about a month or two passed, and I noticed a few things. I noticed, again, still not like some epiphany that I noticed I was sleeping better. I was more personable to fellow inmates. I was talking to my family. And those were 3 things that I hadn't done in probably a decade. And so I kind of started to figure out that I was being of service to another human being for the first time in my life. Okay, so what I thought I did on Saturdays and Sundays was me being of service to y'all. That's not. That's just, hobby, and that's just entertainment for people when they want to kind of get outside their lives. And you're not real, so it doesn't really matter. I was very real to this guy who was asking me for help, and he was very real to me. And no one knew about it. I used to, when I say being of service, I used to associate service with money. So when I was with the Chargers, when I first started out, I used to do a lot of work with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And these are for terminal kids with cancer and things like that. And I'm telling you right now, I'd love to say that it was about the kids, but for me, it was more about that people saw that I was a good guy. And that's a really selfish way to look at it. And it's hard for me to say those things because I know some of the kids I worked with there are dead and gone. And for some reason, my punk ass is still standing here. But that's what it was to me. That's what service was it's money. And I had a lot of it. And so that was currency, and it could be taken and shared about in that way. So when I talk about service to others, it was always about optics and people who saw it. No one saw this. No one saw me in there doing that. No one sees what you're doing either. Now, hopefully, with the help of the last mile, people will start to understand a little bit more about what you're doing, I've witnessed like 3 or 4 of the websites in there already, and like two of them already were about other people. We're about philanthropic. We're about helping people, dealing with suicide prevention and things like that, or sales of the product to help. That right there is thinking outside yourself. Not about you, but about something bigger than you, okay? So that's what I figured out. And so I knew that when I got out, that it couldn't be about me anymore. And that's a hard thing to do for a narcissist, right? Like I walk into a room like this and I go, please don't recognize me. Please don't recognize me. And then like 10 minutes in, I'm like, why the fuck isn't anybody recognizing me? I'm Ryan fucking Leaf.
You're in a room full of narcissists.
Yeah. Man, it's about us. I'm taking time to make things about me. That's not what narcissism is, man. Yeah, it is. This is about me today, all right? It's always about you, bro. And so I knew it had to be about someone else. Now, I hadn't figured this part out of it yet, but I walked out December 3rd, 2014, okay? So I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary. So it's just a big deal. Because if there were odds, if there was a sportsbook odds maker out there putting odds on me returning to prison the day I walked out, December 3rd, I probably would have been pretty big odds that I'm back. Just old behavior, who I was, right? I didn't make the right choices. I didn't do the right things. And that's hard for me to say for somebody who became a millionaire at 21, who went and played at the highest possible level of his profession, was a sponsor for Pepsi, Cadillac, Rolex, and Nike. For me to be able to say that to other peers of mine and go, I do not make proper choices. I need help making the right choice. That's extremely difficult for somebody who has accomplished so much. But it's the truth. When you are finally able to walk by the mirror and look at the guy in the mirror, like the guy in the mirror, and to like the guy in the mirror, you got to be honest with yourself. And I couldn't look at myself in the mirror for a long, long time. And I remember the one time I finally walked by in prison and I was in my little cell and I looked at my face and I could kind of just go, Ryan, you're here because of what you did, no one else. I had a roommate for the longest who just complained every single night about the reason why he was in prison, because it was because of this girl. You know, I blamed everybody. I blamed the NFL. I blamed the media. I blamed doctors who prescribed me my medication. I'm an opiate addict. The only drug I've ever taken in my life is a prescribed opiate. And it still took me to the very place that we all go to. And it doesn't matter. Like, you know, it's just as if I was on a street corner with a needle in my arm. It's the same thing. You know, the drugs is a symptom. No matter what you use it for, if it's a drug, if it's sex, if it's money, if it's food, if it's, you know, crime, if it's, you know, self-harm, it doesn't matter. Those are all the symptoms to what the underlying foundation of what we're dealing with is, and everybody probably has some dual diagnosis that exists that we're going through, mental health-wise. That's what the bigger issue is. It's just tacked on to everything else. So, I'm here because of what I did, no one else. That breaks it down pretty simple. Like, can you blame anybody ever again? If you break it down to that thing? Like, because you can't control what someone did, someone said, someone thinks. We think we can as human beings. This is glorious, right?
Amen.
And so, your attitude, your behavior, your effort. Those are the only three things you can control. And so I'm really in it with my son right now because he's figuring it out, but he still hasn't figured out the idea that there's negative consequences to negative behavior or negative attitude. I didn't understand what accountability really was. Like, well, what was your part in it? That's what accountability is, period. No matter what anybody else did. Because for the longest time, I blamed the Chargers. You know, I was 21 years old. Well, I was 20 years old when I was drafted, actually. And I was turned 21 while I was with them right after the draft. And they gave me $31 million. Now, I got placed on a pedestal pretty early in my life because I was really good at something, you know? And I think my development stopped or was arrested. Like, it amazes me when people are dumbstruck by the idea when an NFL player blows it all or a basketball player, NBA guy blows it all by doing stupid shit. Well, we don't have any life skills. We're just really good at something. It probably makes us worse at being human beings than a normal person because we've had everything handed to us or we got placed on this pedestal and we never had to actually behave like a real person, you know? And so it shouldn't be that surprising when, you know, my dumb ass gets run out of the NFL in 5 years because of my behavior. It shouldn't be a big surprise. But when it does happen, instead of taking a look internally, I looked outside and I was like, well, you're fucking with me. You're messing with me. You're the reason. And then I surrounded myself with people that told me that I was the victim. Like, yeah, you're right, Ryan. Those guys are wrong. And I'm like, yeah, you guys got my back. You know, because I was their golden goose, right? They weren't going to mess up that ride. You know, flying off in a private jet to Mexico and spending a week on a yacht, eating. Why would you mess that up? Well, I had a couple of really good friends that did mess that up. They said, I can't do this anymore. I can't watch you just absolutely strip yourself from everything you ever worked for. And I looked at them like they were assholes, but they were the ones that actually cared about me the most, right? One of them was my little brother. You know, he had to follow in my footsteps his whole life, and I think he was a better quarterback than me. He went to the University of Oregon. He played quarterback at Oregon. Then he even got an offer to go play for the Jets. And he was so despondent of what football had done with our family and everything like that. He's like, nah, fuck that. I'm going to go up to Alaska and be a fishing guide. So he went up to Alaska for like 6 months and guided fishing instead of going to play pro football. Because of what, he's the smartest of us all, by the way. And so that was the big part of it. And so when I start this whole thing about trying to make myself relatable to you guys, because I think I was talking to Kate, who sent me all our stuff, and Kate's like, this was the coolest thing. I sent a shirt to a celebrity, and I'm just like, I'm not a fucking celebrity, right? I'm inmate 500-2025. That's who I am. And that's okay. You think I'm a bust. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem, right? Ironically enough, because of programs, because of the new way of thinking of a way of me wanting to just make it about other people. As the narcissist, I assumed to make my life better, it had to be about me. What could you do for me? How can you make my life better? What do I get out of it? And that doesn't ever do that for you, okay? It just, your self-interests are piqued with that. Ironically enough, what it is when you make it about somebody else, your life gets better. Now, maybe that just works for me. Maybe it's just something that affects me. And it has. For the last 9 years, 11 months, and 3 days, I've made it about other people, and my life has gotten unbelievably better. I can't even tell you. If you were standing outside of that prison when I walked out and said, hey, Ryan, 9 years, 11 months, and 2 days from now, you're going to be in the Putnamville Department of Corrections in Indiana, working with a group that is going to change the lives of these people when they get out. So, we are the exception. Like, the rule is you get out, you come back. It just is. So you have to be a change agent. You have to be different. And this program is different. If somebody also said, hey, we have a coding program that we're putting in prisons to teach you how to code without the internet, I think everybody else would have probably looked around and went, what the fuck are you talking about? How are we supposed to do that? It's outside the box, right? So be outside the box. Don't be the rule, be the exception. I've kind of always been the exception, so why not continue with that? I started to become the status quo, and that's not who I am, and it's not who anybody in this room has to be, ever. So, hopefully that makes me relatable a little bit to y'all, because it's always the thing I wanted to do when I walk in here. I don't want everybody to look at me and go, well, it was easy for him. Now, don't get me wrong. Once I started doing the next right thing and things started to happen, I do not take it for granted when the fact that I was a pro football player opens the door. So, like, it's not lost on me when I do the next right thing, amazing things happen for me. And that may not always be the case for other people. You might have to fight your claw, your ass off for some things, but it's going to be worth it. Anything that is difficult ultimately is worth it, that process, okay? So the last 10 years have been about that, all right? It's been about helping other people. It's been about, when you do that too, whatever shit you're going through, you don't think about. And so the morning that that paper came out, now, while I was in prison, I got that hope when I started helping these guys. That's what it generated for me. But like hope's this just razor thin thing. It's so fleeting. You have it. It's something you're holding on to. But when you haven't had anything else really reinvesting in that, it can be over. And it did in that moment. When my hometown newspaper just fucking trolled my ass in front of everybody. Like, Ryan Leaf's out, lock up your medicine cabinets. It's a disease. It's a brain disease. And you're fucking just making fun of me because I wasn't a great NFL quarterback. So that hope was just, boom, dashed. And my muscle memory is like, I don't want to feel this way. I'm not going to feel this way. So I went and got in the car, and I'm like, my grandfather just had hip surgery replacement. He's got fucking pills somewhere. And off I started going. I was driving there. Like, it was over. Like, I know what the tape looks like when it ends. It ends up here, or it ends up dead. Like, there's no third direction. Really, realistically, it's dead or you figure it out. I don't really buy into the institutions, prisons or death mentality. It's death or you figure it out. And as I'm driving, the good part of this is because of, I've been sober 3 years. Somehow I stayed sober in prison. I don't know how the hell I did that, because I'm kind of a bougie drug user, right? I'm a Vicodin guy. It's acetaminophen mixed with damn opiates. They would smuggle in Suboxone, and they had these little strips, and I'd watch guys take them and they abuse them, and they would just get so sick and everything like that. And I'm just like, I'm a bougie drug user, okay? I'm sorry, that's just the way it was. So I didn't use for some reason while I was in there. And it was the perfect place for me to do it, right? I didn't do anything. I sat on my ass, I got fat, watched TV. Why not be high while I'm doing it? So whatever higher power, again, just blessed me with the idea that I wasn't going to do that while I was in there. I didn't. And so when I got out, 3 years sober, but I didn't have any recovery. Like it was just white knuckling it the whole damn time, right? So immediately muscle memory was just like, go, get pills, be numbed. You don't have to feel anything anymore, Ryan. Don't feel this. Don't feel this shame. Don't feel this failure. Don't feel this guilt. Don't all of it. But as I'm driving, whatever little hope that was tethered to me a little bit allowed me to kind of disassociate, and I was outside myself. Like if I was making a movie of it, I would be like me driving, myself disassociating in the passenger seat, looking at me going, what the fuck are you doing, bro? You know where this goes, right? What changed while you were in there? And I've told you what it was. I was of service to other human being. So we flip a bitch and we head back to town, and we went right to the mission. We went right to the homeless shelter. And I walked in there, and I really didn't do a damn thing. I went back there for like 10 straight days, and I didn't really do anything other than sit down and listen to these men and women talk to me. And I'm going to tell you this right now, and you all can relate to this. I know you can, because I did, even in the highest form of it. They don't feel seen. You don't feel heard. And they did. It's harder for all of you because sometimes you are not necessarily made an example of. You can get away or hide or be in the shadows a lot of times, and most of the time, you just disappear. And the reminder that every life is precious is one of the hardest things to do to people, especially when they've been through the justice system and have been incarcerated. And like me, believe that we're pieces of shit. And that's all you really can do. The more you start projecting out further and stuff like that, you can't control any of that stuff. What happened in the past? Ironically enough, and I told you guys this when I said I like the guy I see in the mirror now. Like I love him. With the scars, with the baggage, with all of it. It's crazy to me to think that I am more confident as a human being now with all of that stuff than I ever was as a starting NFL quarterback. When I first acknowledged that or started to understand that, which was about 9 months ago, only about 9 months ago, when I could stand up in a room and get an applause and look them in the eye and go, thank you, instead of look down at my feet and go, what the hell are they doing, you know? That was the difference. I like who I am. I like everything that comes with it. When this all happened to us, we felt like it was probably the end of the world, especially the first time. And then when you find this life of peace and unchaos, you realize that your world doesn't spin without it. Like, I have the best perspective of anybody that I will know because I hear people complain a lot. And I always look at them and go, it could be worse. Oh, how could it be worse? When you could be in prison. And at first they don't know if to take me seriously or not. And then I'll have buddies with me or something, like look at them and go, yeah, man. Like, at night I lay down with my wife in bed. I love my fucking bed. And I'll just like kind of roll over and dig into my spot and be like, I'm so grateful for this bed. And she's almost like sick and tired of it. She's like, I heard her the other night, she's like, okay, I get it, you love our bed. But she doesn't have the perspective we do, right? She didn't sleep on a concrete slab for 3 years. So you're gonna have a different perspective than anybody else. And it's what you choose to do with it when you walk out of here. I just interviewed a guy by the name of JJ Velasquez, okay, for the Last Mile Radio. He has spent the last 24 years in prison on a wrongful charge. 24 years. My first question to him was, how are you not the most angry person in this world? His kids were 6 and 3 when he was taken from him. And he said it when he even said it. He's been almost conditioned. He's like, they were 6 and 3 when I left them. And I'm like, JJ, you didn't fucking leave them. You got kidnapped, bro. And held hostage for 24 years. Like, he's had to recondition the way he thinks too and the way he talks about stuff but while he was in there, exactly the same thing. And I did everything that they said I did, right? So we're completely different mindsets, right? You know, In fact, I got off easy. I was probably in 100 houses in my hometown. Like, I went and spoke in my hometown a little while back, and I talked to somebody. I said, if you felt like when you came home one day between 2010 and 2012, if you thought somebody might have been in your house, I probably was in your fucking house. Like, you know, people in Montana don't lock their doors. People in Montana, they go to the dentist one time and they take 2 pills and their prescription bottle sits in that medicine cabinet forever. Like, my hometown was my drug dealer. I didn't know a drug dealer. I know like 100 now because I went to prison, but still, you know? Like, that shit's real. And I just asked him that question. How are you not the most angry person in the world? 24 years of your life. It was 1998, the year I was drafted, the year I became a multimillionaire, and he was thrown into a cell and has been there ever since, fighting his ass off to tell people, I didn't kill this person. I was never there. And what changed for him is he started making it about other people while I was in there. He started helping people with the Innocence Project. He got some people out before he got out because he helped them who were wrongfully committed. That's all perspective, people. Like I was in during the interview, I was like fucking angry for him. Like, you could see me starting to get kind of huffed up and going, where are these dudes? I want to find them, you know. But he was just, and I will say this, you know, I joke and I'm funny and I'm self-deprecating, and I think a lot of times it's because if I wasn't laughing, sometimes I'd cry, you know, because it sucks. I have 2 kids now, and the innocence of them make me think, like, where did that go? How did that dissipate? How did that be taken away? How did I allow that to happen, you know? And so it really is on you to do. You've given the opportunity. You chose to do this. There's forks in the road no matter where you look. You deal with the situation in a positive and healthy way or a negative and toxic one, period. It's on you. Anytime someone calls you a name here, disrespects you, you have a choice. I understand it's a much different world we live in when we're in prison than we are when we're out. But you have a choice to deal with the situation in a positive and healthy way or a negative and toxic one. And I, for the longest time, dealt with them in a negative and toxic way because it's easier. It's easier to smoke somebody in the face or call them a name than it is to take the high road, which shows restraint and love and understanding. It just is. We live in a world that exists like that. I mean, you guys didn't get to witness it. You see the news, but yesterday, Election Day, I mean, it was what the last 3 years have been like in terms of just everybody wants to fight each other, you know? And I've chosen not to fight anybody the last 3 years. I've chose to lift people up and make it better because that makes my life better. So hopefully I didn't ramble on too long here, but I think when I walk into a room like this, I always want to make myself feel like I belong here. I'm you. Seriously, I just happened to play football good for a couple years. That's all. That's all. I'm exactly like every single one of you in here. I'm a flawed human being trying to be better every day. That's it. And I hope that this program does for you what it's done for me to be an ambassador of it in just a short amount of time. I mean, I was looking for some more purposeful things. I really was. And this came along just like at the most opportune moment. You know, it's hard to look at the razor wire and hear the gates open and the buzzing and stuff like that. Like that's triggering, but that doesn't have anything to do with me. Like, today's about you. It's the reason I'm here. It has nothing to do with Matt. When you walk out of here, seriously, you guys could go, that dude's full of shit. And that doesn't matter to me. I was asked to be here to be part of the solution, to try to help. And that's all I can control. And I'll do it with a smile and be grateful. I didn't think I'd ever be able to stand in a room full of my peers and go, I'm grateful for having spent 32 months in prison. I don't recommend it. But I'm fucking grateful for it. That's for sure. So I'm excited to get to know each one of you a little bit better. I'll be back here a lot, you know. And this isn't going to be like a one-time thing, you know. It's an easy flight for me to get here. It's right down the road. ironically, it would be weird that I became like a more of a community philanthropic guy than Peyton Manning did here in the town. That'd be crazy. And so I did it. Ironically, it was the first day I got asked to guest host the Dan Patrick Show for the first time, which was a huge day for me. Like that's a big deal, right? I mean, as a 7-time convicted felon, junkie, bust, gets asked to host the biggest sports talk show in existence. That's a big day for me. So I do 3 hours of that in the morning. I take the train into New York City and I do the podcast with the founders, Chris and Bev. And I didn't think anything of it. I just was doing what I do, and I tell my story, and it felt like it was impactful. Chris tells me they had just moved to Connecticut, where my wife and I had just moved and turns out they live like 12 miles away from me. And that's the last I hear of them. You know, they save it, they edit it, they release it farther down the line, and when it is released, it gets a pretty good, response from people. But still, a lot of times, content that I speak on, gets a good response. And then he reached out to me, asking if we could get together. And so I suggested we could play golf, because you could play golf, you get to spend 5 hours with somebody, you really get to learn who they are and whether or not this was truly a shared values type of project. And then at the end of it, I was kind of like, I talked to my wife about it, and I said, I'd like to get more involved with this. Sounds pretty great. And he said he was supposed to go to Montana and go into one of the last mile classrooms in the Montana State Prison, which is where I was released from. And I just happened to be going back up to Montana to drop my kids off with my mom and dad and do some work with the Big Sky Conference. And he said, would you be willing to go in and speak to the last mile classroom in Montana? And another thing that I've done when people ask me to do stuff of service, I say yes, no matter what. That's another thing. It's like the yes man with Jim Carrey in it, where he just started saying yes to everything, and his life turned around differently. It gets crazy. And it got crazy, because guess what? I walked back into the Montana State Prison for the first time in 10 years, saw a couple guards that were there that I got asked the question a couple days before at the Big Sky Conference deal about my feelings about going back in. You drive right by it, the razor wire, the MDIU, which is our intake, our fish row they called it, where I spent, you spent 23 to 24 hours, locked up with somebody else. And so I was going to have a lot of feelings around that, right? And so somebody asked me that question a couple days before in the media, and I started to do it, and it was about me. And I, again, disassociated, and I'm like, and I'm glad they asked me a couple days before, because maybe I don't do that when I get to the state prison. Maybe I'm looking at the razor wire, maybe I see that guard, and I resent it so much that I don't even focus on what I'm supposed to focus on, which is you. And so I thought immediately, I went, this isn't about me, this is about these guys having what finding what I've found. And so I brought my wife with me. She met me 6 months after getting out of prison. She doesn't know really that version of me. And so she walked into a prison with me to see so she got to see that. And I thought it was powerful. I thought the guys in there didn't look at me like I was anything other than what we are. We're the same. And so when I got out and I was driving home, I looked at my wife and I said, I'd love to do this a lot. And I reached out to Chris, who's the founder. He brought his wife over. They met my wife. We talked. He asked me if I would be an ambassador. They have a radio show. I've been doing radio for the last 8 years. It's like The Outliers. I don't know if anybody's ever read the Malcolm Gladwell Outliers book. 10,000 hours makes you an expert. I'm pretty good at what I do now. I can stand in front of a microphone and talk. And it not be written down and shit like that. Like this is who I am and how I do it. And it's important that Chris has a guy that walks into this room like Kevin and like the people who have experienced it. That's what's so great about what the last mile is. When you get out too, I mean, if you want, not only do you have the job that you've been studying and working towards, but you have an incredible support staff willing to have your back to help facilitate you into a position. We're about to go tomorrow, speak with the Indiana Pacers who hired this young woman when she got out. She works for the Pacers now as a last mile graduate. Like, there are people who want to support it because they know how difficult this is and what kind of work this is. Now, it's a different story to get the parole boards in these states on board to really understand that this just isn't another certificate, right? This is real work. So it's a long answer to how I became an ambassador. There you go. Yeah. Anybody else? Come on, I just fucking bled for you for like an hour and you're just gonna... Anybody got it? Come on.
We're just treating you like one of us.
Yeah. I've been in prison. We fucking don't stop talking to each other. Well, you ask questions all the time about stuff. You start arguing about who's the greatest of all time and shit like that. Yeah, you got plenty to say. Come on, I'm just going to start pointing out people and that gets embarrassing. Let's go.
So do you still eat ramen noodles?
So I've never had a cup of coffee in my life. And as you probably know, coffee is like fucking currency in here, right? Yeah. And we got 2 packs in commissary every week. And man, I would sell that shit for like triple, quadruple what it's worth. And then I would load up on, burrito, all my tortillas and ramen. Yeah. But seriously though, yeah, I had ramen Monday night, beef ramen. Yeah, I was just like, I want something really salty because I just got done speaking and I wanted comfort food. And so I ate some fucking ramen on Monday night. Two goddamn packages, man. My salt intake was probably through the damn roof. Yeah.
How hard was it for you to shed all that weight?
It was hard. I was 325 when I walked out of prison, guys. I was about to stroke out from high blood pressure. It's food. It's just food. It's what you put in your body. And so my wife and I, when we got back from the Super Bowl 2 years ago, I was 274, and I was, I'm just doing TV now. I was on Good Morning Football, and I was doing some other TV stuff. So I saw a picture of myself, and I was just like, fuck. I have an 11-month-old baby girl. I'm going to be 65 when she graduates from high school. So I'm going to be an old dad, and these kids are so much damn fun. I mean, I am just loving being a dad, and I want to be around forever then. So to do that, I better switch and change some things. So like anything, when you get out and you're doing the next right thing in your life when it comes to, the justice side of things, doing the next right thing, let's start doing it with the food that we put in our bodies. As it turns out, too, with the fact that I may have CTE from playing all those years and all the trauma I have to my brain, it really is about what I put in my body, too, So I had never had a soda in my life until I got to prison either, and then I became a freaking Dr. Pepper junkie, and that's kind of followed me when I got out, So... I try to limit soda intake completely, water, about my body weight in ounces every day, 220 ounces of water a day. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. Each and every one of you can do this, right? Like, my story isn't unique or more powerful or better or worse. The fact that you guys have experienced what you've experienced and are willing to rip off the Band-Aids in the hopes that someone else may not have to go through what you went through, your lives can be unbelievably purposeful.